The Rules of Schwarzwald, Part 1, Shadows in the Black Forest. The Schwarzwald was never truly silent, even in the stillness of dawn when the mist clung to the treetops like ghostly breath. The forest murmured, leaves rustling without wind, distant cracks echoing like footsteps. For 15 years, Ethan Caldwell had walked these trails, memorizing every ridge and stream, every shift in the air that meant danger was near. He had learned one thing above all. The forest watched back. Ethan was the senior ranger of the Blackthorn sector, a place so dense and ancient it swallowed sunlight by noon. Locals called it Der Schattenwald, the Shadow Woods, and avoided it after dusk. They whispered of old spirits and cursed hunters, stories passed down to keep children from wandering too far, but Ethan had seen enough to know those stories were more warning than myth. That winter morning, the forest was cold enough for his breath to cloud. He was 2 miles into his patrol when he spotted movement ahead, a man standing near the old Blackthorn marker stone. The stranger wore a brown hiking coat and carried a half-empty backpack. His clothes were clean. Too clean for someone claiming to be lost. As Ethan approached, the man turned slowly, revealing a narrow, pale face and eyes that reflected no light. "Morning," Ethan called out, keeping his tone neutral. "You all right, sir? You're a long way from the main trail." The man smiled faintly. "I lost my way," he said, voice almost mechanical. Ethan's instinct prickled. Something in the man's posture was wrong, too still, too deliberate. The air between them felt unnaturally cold. "Where are you headed?" Ethan asked, his gloved hand resting casually on his belt, close to the sidearm he carried more for peace of mind than for use. The man tilted his head. "Home," he said simply. "Where's home?" The stranger's eyes flicked toward the horizon. "In the forest," Ethan frowned. Then, as a ray of sunlight pierced the canopy, he noticed it. The man had no shadow. No breath misted from his lips in the cold air. Every muscle in Ethan's body went rigid. Greta Muller's voice echoed. In his head, an old ranger who'd trained him years ago. "If you meet someone lost who doesn't seem human, don't help them. Don't speak too long. And if they have no shadow, run." Ethan stepped back. Slowly. "All right, stay put, I'll radio a unit too." The man's eyes turned completely black. His grin widened. "Ting too far." Skin stretching as if pulled from the inside. Then he lunged forward. Ethan drew his pistol and fired a warning shot into the ground. The echo shattered the silence, and the man dissolved into black smoke, vanishing between the trees. For a long moment, Ethan stood frozen, the scent of gunpowder mingling with the cold air. Only the faint sound of whispering wind remained. That night, he opened his old leather notebook and wrote, "Rule number 1. If someone refuses help but their eyes are wrong, leave immediately or prepare to fight." 2 weeks later, snow fell heavy across Schwarzwald. The forest was muffled, sounds swallowed by white. Ethan was on the late shift, his flashlight beam slicing through darkness like a blade. It was close to midnight when he heard it. Small voice calling from somewhere ahead. "Uncle Ethan, please, help me." The voice was soft, trembling. His blood turned to ice. It was her voice. His niece, Anna, the same little girl he'd buried 3 years ago after a car accident. He froze on the trail. The voice came again, closer now. "Uncle Ethan, it's cold, please." He wanted to move every instant. It screamed at him to run to her, to pull her out of whatever nightmare had taken hold of the woods, but another memory stopped him. The story of Hans Fischer, a ranger torn apart after chasing a child's cry deep into the forest. They'd found his body the next morning, shredded and half buried beneath roots. Ethan's flashlight shook in his hand. The voice was so convincing, he forced himself to stay still. "You're not her," he whispered. "You're not real." The air around him grew thick. Then the gentle sobbing twisted into a guttural growl. Something huge moved between the trees, breaking branches. Chess as it came closer, Ethan flicked open a flare from his belt and lit it, the red light flaring to life with a hiss. A shriek split the night. In that instant, he saw it, a tall, sinewy shape crouched just beyond the tree line, skin gray and stretched, its face wrong, too long to hollow. The thing recoiled from the light, hissing like burning metal. Ethan hurled the flare toa, rode it, and turned to run, his boots punching through snow. Behind him, the forest roared. The thing didn't follow. When he finally stopped to catch his breath, Ethan's hands were trembling so badly he could barely write, but he forced the words into his notebook anyway, underlined twice. Rule number 2. Never follow a cry for help, no matter whose voice it is. If it comes closer, use light, always light. The third encounter came in spring. By then, the rangers had started whispering again about strange shapes at night, about missing hikers. Some joked that the forest was alive. Ethan didn't laugh. He was out on a survey mission with 2 new recruits, checking markers near the old ravine. The morning fog was thick, the ground soft and damp beneath their boots. That was when Ethan noticed something that made his stomach knot. A massive oak, one he'd marked himself the week before, had moved. It now stood 50 meters from where it had been, leaving a trench in the ground like something had dragged it. The younger rangers laughed nervously. Probably a mistake, one said. Ethan didn't answer. He ran his gloved hand over the ground, tracing deep grooves shaped like clawed footprints. No machinery could have done that, no storm either. They set up camp by noon, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The forest was silent again, too silent. That night, while the others slept, Ethan sat by the fire, writing notes by dim lantern light. The air around him began to hum softly, a vibration he felt in his teeth. Then the ground shifted. He looked up just as the roots of the oak began to move. The great tree trembled, creaking like bones, its roots twisted and pulled free of the earth, curling toward him like enormous tendrils. Ethan stumbled back, nearly falling into the fire. One of the roots lashed forward, tearing his jacket sleeve. He scrambled for his rifle, but before he could fire, a whisper slithered through his mind. A voice, not in any language he knew, but heavy and ancient, filled with meaning that wasn't meant for human understanding. He wakes, he remembers. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the tree went still. The forest exhaled. Ethan stood there, heart pounding, staring at the massive oak as if expecting it to move again, but it didn't. Only the faint whisper lingered, curling through his thoughts like smoke. When dawn came, the recruits found Ethan sitting near the ashes of the fire, pale and silent. He didn't speak until they were halfway back to base. Later that day, he wrote in his journal. Rule number 3. If the trees move or whisper, run. Do not look back. Do not listen. By the end of spring, the notebook was already half full. Each page was a rule, each rule written in the shaky hand of a man who'd seen something he shouldn't have survived. The other rangers didn't ask questions anymore. They noticed the way Ethan checked his shadow in the morning light, how he kept a flare clipped to his belt even during daylight patrols. Some said he was paranoid, others said he'd lost his mind in the woods, but those who had walked the blackthorn trails at night, those who had heard the faint echo of a child's laughter where no child could be, they never mocked him. They just prayed they'd remember his rules if the forest ever called their name, because in Schwarzwald, the forest didn't forgive mistakes. And Ethan Caldwell was beginning to understand that it was only just beginning to wake. Part 2, Blood and Echoes, Segment 1, The Death of Carl Brown. The storm had passed hours ago, but the forest still wept. Droplets slid from the high branches of the Schwarzwald oaks, falling in rhythm like the ticking of some ancient clock. The air was heavy with the smell of wet earth and pine resin. Ethan Caldwell and Carl Brown trudged through the mud, their boots sinking into the black soil. They had been walking since dawn, following the faint trail of a missing camper named Anna Schmidt. 24, student. Last seen hiking near Raven Creek 3 days ago. Carl walked a few steps ahead, humming a low tune that seemed to careless for the place they were in. He was younger than Ethan by 10 years. Broad-shouldered and always smiling. The kind of man who believed the world could be fixed with good humor and strong coffee. Remind me again, Carl said, sweeping his flashlight across the undergrowth. Why do they always vanish? Around Raven Creek. Bad water. Cursed selfies, Ethan gave a thin smile. Maybe the forest just likes that area, Carl chuck. Led, if I ever disappear, tell them it was aliens. At least my mother will think it's cool. The humor didn't help. The forest was quieter than usual. Too quiet, no birds, no wind, even their breath. He sounded muffled. Ethan could feel that pressure again, the one that always came before something happened. It was like being watched through the trees by something that didn't need eyes. By late afternoon, they found the campsite, a single tent half collapsed, its canvas torn by something sharp. The fire pit was cold, scattered with ashes that hadn't been disturbed by wind. A red scarf, bright against the gray mud, hung from a branch nearby. Carl picked it up. Anna's. Ethan nodded. Could be. He crouched near the tent, scanning the ground. There were footprints, some human, others too deep, too wide. They led away into the forest and vanished into the mist. Carl's radio hissed softly, then went dead. Ethan's stomach tightened. That's not good. Carl shrugged. Just interference. Happens all the time, but Ethan knew better. Interference didn't happen here unless the forest wanted it to. They followed the footprints until the trees began to change. Icker, older, their bark black with age. The mist deepened, until the world shrank to a tunnel of gray. Then a voice broke through. Carl stopped dead. The voice was faint, trem. Bling. Female. Did you hear that? He whispered. Ethan raised his gun. Stay behind me. Wait, Carl said, scanning the fog. That sounded like, don't. Ethan's tone was sharp. Don't move yet. But she was already there, stepping out from the mist. A young woman, barefoot and pale, clothes torn and damp. Her hair clung to her face, eyes wide with relief. Carl, she sobbed. Thank God. I thought I was going to die out here. Carl's face lit. Anna, we've been looking for you. Ethan's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. Don't go near her. Carl frowned. She's freezing. Ethan. Look at her. Ethan hissed. Really look. Carl hesitated. Her breathing was steady. Too steady for someone who'd been lost for days and near freezing temperatures. Her lips were ant blue. Her eyes were glassy, like reflections in still water. Then Ethan noticed something else. The beam of his flashlight crossed her face a half second after it should have, as if the light had to catch up to her. Back up, Ethan ordered now. But Carl took another step forward. It's okay, Anna, you're safe now. The woman smiled, and that smile broke something deep inside Ethan's chest because it was wrong, too wide to still. The muscles of her face bending in ways human skin shouldn't. Her mouth opened far too much, and the sound poured out. It wasn't a scream, not really. It was like 100 whispers stacked together, vibrating the air. Carl froze, eyes wide, unable to move. Then she lunged. Her body convulsed as her skin tore like paper, revealing. Something beneath, long limbs slick and dark, bones bent at impossible angles. Her mouth split all the way to her ears. Carl fired once, but too late. The creature slammed into him, and he went down hard. The sound that followed was a wet, tearing noise. No, Ethan raised his weapon and fired twice into its chest. The bullets tore through, hitting nothing solid. The creature twisted its head toward him, teeth slick with blood, and laughed. Ethan grabbed a flare from his belt and struck it against his knee. The red flame burst to life. The creature shrieked, the sound piercing, furious, and dissolved into a cloud of Black mist that vanished into the trees. When the smoke cleared, only Carl remained. His chest was open, eyes glassy, blood soaking into the moo. Ethan dropped to his knees beside him. For the first time in years, he couldn't breathe. Carl's hand was still warm when Ethan took it. He stayed there for a long time, the flare burning down to its base, painting the forest in red light. When he finally stood, he didn't look back. He couldn't. That night, at the ranger station, the others spoke in low voice. No one asked questions, no one had to. Ethan sat at his desk. The flare smell still in his clothes, Carl's blood still under his fingernails. He opened his notebook with shaking hands, the page beneath H. His last entry was blank, waiting. He wrote slowly, each word pressed deep into the paper. Rule number 4. Do not approach anyone showing unnatural signs, even if they look like someone you know. Use weapons without hesitation. He stared at the ink until it bled slightly under his thumb. Outside, the wind rose. Somewhere beyond the station walls, the forest whispered again, faint, almost key. But Ethan knew better. It wasn't kindness. It was curiosity. Segment 2. The voice of Friedrich Muller. The nights after Carl's death were the hardest Ethan had known in 15 years of service. The forest no longer felt like a workplace or a landscape to protect. It felt sentient, coiled in silence, listening for his grief. He slept little. When he did, he dreamed of footsteps circling his cabin, of Carl's voice calling from the tree line, always ending in a wet gasp. Each morning he would wake drenched in sweat, the smell of smoke and blood still clinging to him. Friedrich Muller. His commander didn't press for details. A practical man, Muller believed in reports, not superstitions. Yet when he looked at Ethan's face, gray-eyed, sleepless, his own ardent expression softened. Take a lighter patrol, he'd said. North sector. You need air. Ethan doubted the Schwarzwald had any left to spare. The following week, he drove the jeep up T. Raven's Hollow, where the pines grew so close they scraped both sides of the trail. It was an area known for sudden fog, radio dead zones, and the feeling that one was never quite alone. The radio on the dashboard crackled softly as he climbed out, slinging his pack over his shoulder. He checked his pistol, his flares, his knife. He touched the small leather notebook in his breast pocket like a charm. He began walking. The woods were quiet, except for the dripping meltwater of early spring. Ravens perched high above, silent. He followed the creek's edge, mapping fallen branches and checking trail cameras. Hours passed. Then the radio hissed sharply. A voice bled through, distorted but unmistakable. Caldwell need assistance. Ravens Hollow no. Ethan froze. It was Friedrich Muller. He raised the radio to his mouth. Command, this is Caldwell. Say again. Static. Then again, urgent, the same voice. Ethan, I'm hurt by the old bridge, please. His pulse quickened. Friedrich was supposed to be at headquarters, 10 kilometers away. Base, confirm Commander Muller's location. After a long crackle, the operator's calm voice answered, Commander Muller is here at the station, sir. He's fine. White Ethan stared into the trees. The voice came again, this time fainter but closer, as if moving through the forest. Ethan, help me. He shut off the radio and drew his pistol. His breath fogged the cold air. Every instinct told him to back away, to follow the rules, but curiosity, that old human flaw, made him listen. The voice drifted between the trunks, always just ahead, sometimes behind. Please, Ethan, you're my only. Stop. His voice cracked the stillness. Where a Ryu. No answer. Only the sound of something breathing in rhythm with his own. He turned. Flashlight beams slicing through mist and caught a glimpse of movement. A human silhouette, half seen through fog, wearing a ranger's coat. Ethan's throat tightened. Friedrich, the figure tilted, its head slowly, unnaturally. Then another voice spoke from behind him, Clara Schmidt's voice, clear and trembling. Ethan, it Esme, don't leave me here. He spun around. Another shape stood a few meters away, hand outstretched, then another voice gargles. Ethan, please, I didn't make it out. You can still help me. The air erupted with sound, dozens of voices, overlapping, pleading. Familiar, they called his name from every direction. Hans, Lena, his niece Anna, all speaking in the same flat cadence, every tone off by a fraction, like a record warped by heat. Ethan clamped his hands over his ears, stumbling backward. Stop it, the forest answered with laughter. Not human laughter, thin, chittering, echoing. From the fog, shapes began to emerge, tall, stick-limbed, silhouettes, their movements jerky and wrong, gliding more than walking. They circled him slowly, their faces shrouded. Ethan raised the pistol. Stay back. One stepped into the light. It was wearing a ranger's uniform, identical to his own, the namatag smeared with blood. When it smiled, the skin around its mouth cracked. Like bark splitting in frost, Ethan fired. The gunshot shattered the air, the figure staggered but didn't fall. The others crept closer, their bodies twitching, elongating. He fumbled for a flare, struck it against his thigh. The bright red light hissed alive, painting the fog crimson. The creatures recoiled, screeching like metal dragged across stone. He hurled the flare forward and bolted down slope, branches clawing at his jacket. Voices chased him, Carl, Friedrich, even his own echoing in the dark. You can't run from yourself. He broke through the trees into a clearing and stumbled to a halt. The mist had thinned, revealing a circle of standing stones older than memory. They jutted from the ground like teeth. In the center, the snow had melted into a spiral pattern, black soil beneath, around him. The forest fell silent again, only the flare's hiss remained, dimming fast. Ethan turned once, weapon raised, but the silhouettes were gone. For a long time he stood there, chest heaving, staring at the spiral in the dirt. Something about it felt intentional, like handwriting in a language too old to read. When the flare died, darkness swallowed the clearing whole. He ran all the way back to his jeep without stopping. Back at headquarters, Friedrich Muller was waiting on the porch, pipe in hand, expression unreadable. You look like hell, he said. Ethan handed him the radio log, voice low. Someone or something used your voice. Tried to lure me. Muller studied him. And did you follow it? Almost, the commander sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Caldwell, we can't put this in an official report. I know. They stood in still. And a while, the wind whistled through the gutters, carrying the faint scent of pine. Smoke. Finally, Muller said quietly, whatever it is out there. It's testing us. It knows your name. Ethan nodded. It knows all of them. He went inside, poured a cup of stale coffee, and sat at his desk until his hands stopped shaking. Then he took out the notebook. The pages had become a ritual, his own defense against Adness. He turned to a clean sheet and wrote in slow, deliberate strokes. Rule number 5. Always verify identities before responding to any familiar voice. If there's doubt, draw your weapon first. He underlined the last word twice, the sound of wind. Against the window almost masked another noise, the faintest whisper from the tree line beyond the station. Good, Ethan, keep where. He froze, breath caught in his chest. The voice was soft, neither male nor female, echoing from the dark outside. He rose, crossed to the window, and peered out. Only his reflection stared back. Still, he wrote again beneath the last rule. They're learning my language. Then he closed the notebook and turned off the light. Segment 3. Jonas Keller's disappearance. When came gray and brittle over Schwarzwald station. The forest outside glistened with dew and old frost. The mist hung low, clinging to the branches like webbing. Ethan watched it from the message. All window, coffee cooling in his hand. The others spoke in hushed tones, their faces pale, sleepless. Carl's death, the voices in the woods, none of it was written in officia. Reports, but rumor traveled faster than truth ever could. That morning, Commander Muller assembled a group of new recruits, young, eager, and still unscarred. Among them was Jonas Keller, barely twee, and High 5, cocky in the way only the untested can be. He laughed too loud, wore his uniform like a costume, and when he caught Ethan's weary stare, he grinned, "You're the one writ. In the ghost rules, right?" Ethan didn't reply. Jonas tapped the notebook tucked into Ethan's pocket. "Can't wait to see what the next one's about. Maybe don't look under the bed." The room went quiet. Muller's voice broke the tension. "Caldwell, take the recruits on a perimeter sweep through Sector B routine training patrol." "Keller, you're on point." Jonas saluted with mock preachy. "Cyan." "Yes, sir." Ethan said nothing. He simply nodded. Slinging his rifle, they entered the woods at first light. Four of them, Ethan, Jonas, Clara Schmidt, and Lucas Weber, a quiet boy who had everything but spoke rarely. The forest greeted them. With its usual indifference, birds sang distantly, muffled by mist. The air smelled of damp earth and pine. Jonas led confidently, humming a tune, as he hacked branches out of the path. Clara walked behind him, jaw tight. Ethan could feel her unease, a mirror of his own early years before the forest taught him humility. Hours passed. They marked waypoints, replaced trail cameras, and took notes on wildlife traces. Nothing unusual until they reached the old ridge trail where the trees grew unnaturally straight, their bark darker than the rest. Ethan stopped. "We're turning back." Jonas laughed. "Why?" "We've barely covered the map. You afraid the trees might bite?" "Keller," Ethan said, keeping his voice level, "this area's off limits, unstable ground." "Yeah." Jonas crouched, scooping a handful of soil. "Looks stable to me." Clara shot Ethan a look. He shook his head, signaling to stay quiet. 5 more minutes, Jonas said, already walking. Ahead, the mist thickened almost immediately. It wasn't natural fog, it moved in sheets, like breath from something massive. "Jonas." Voice echoed faintly. "You coming, Grandpa?" Then his laughter stopped. Ethan's stomach dropped. Jonas, no answer. They moved forward cautiously, flashlights cutting narrow cones of light. The forest had changed, the path gone, the trees arranged differently, as though they had shifted when no one was looking. Claire's whisper was a thread of sound. "Do you hear that?" At first Ethan heard nothing, then a faint rhythm, like footsteps in the distance, multiple sets synchronized. He raised his hand, signaling silence. The sound grew closer. Through the fog emerged a processionally. Any of figures walking single file between the trees. Men, women, even children, all barefoot, their clothes decades out of date. Their faces were expressionless, eyes white as stone. Each carried something, a candle, a doll, a broken tool. None made a sound. Ethan's heart pounded. He whispered, "No one moves, no one speaks." Jonas' voice came from somewhere to the left, tense now. "Who the hell are they?" "Stay still." Ethan hissed, but Jonas stepped forward. "Hey, we're with the Ranger Corps. Do you need help?" The figures stopped. Every head turned toward him at once. Ethan felt the air pressure drop, the forest holding its breath. Then, as one, the figures vanished, no sound, no trace. Only empty mist where they'd stood. Jonas stumbled. Foe. Reward. Where did something yanked him backward, hard. He hit the ground, shouting, boots scraping against dirt as an unseen force dragged him into the fog. Claire screamed. Lucas raised his rifle, but Ethan barked, "Don't shoot." Jonas' cries cut through the forest, raw and terrified, then silence. Only the echo of his last breath remained. Ethan sprinted after him, following the drag marks that led down a slope. They ended abruptly at a stone circle identical to the one he'd seen before, runic markings carved into each stone, faintly glowing beneath the mist. In the center lay Jonas' combat knife, blade buried upright in the soil. The runes shimmered faintly red. Clara caught up, panting. "Is he gone?" Ethan's voice was hoarse. "The forest took him." Lucas knelt beside the circle. "What does that mean?" Ethan looked around. The air felt charged, alive. It means we leave. Now. They backed away carefully. The mist followed. Curling at their heels, behind them, a whisper rippled through the trees. Jonas' voice, faint but unmistakable. "Wait, Ethan, don't leave me." Clara froze. That? As him, no. Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "That's not him anymore." The whisper rose into a wail that wasn't human, something layered beneath the familiar voice, something vast and cold. By the time they reached the jeep, the sky had turned iron gray and the forest was utterly still. That night, Ethan filed a blank report. Training patrol completed. No incidents. He couldn't bring himself to write what really happened. In the barracks, Clara sat across from him, silent. Her eyes were red from crying. "You knew," she said finally. "Yes, you let him go." Ethan didn't answer. She leaned forward, voice shaking. "Then what are these rules for, if they don't save anyone?" He met her gaze. "They save the ones who listen." She stared at him, then rose and left, slamming the door behind her. Ethan sat alone for a long time, listening to the wind against the walls. When he finally opened the notebook, his hand trembled slightly. He turned to the next blank page. The ink bled into the paper as he wrote. Rule number 6, if something disappears before your eyes, do not follow. The forest takes what it wants. He paused. Beneath it, almost unconsciously, he added, and it always takes the curious first. Outside, the fog was gathering again, thicker than before. It rolled across the compound, swallowing the trees, muffling the world. Ethan stood by the window, watching it rise. For a moment, he thought he saw movement in the mist, shapes, faces, shifting too quickly to focus on. Then a voice drifted through the glass, faint as breath. Rule 7. He froze. The notebook lay open behind him, the pages fluttering. Though there was no wind on the blank sheet, fresh ink began to form, letters curling slowly into words written by no visible hand. Ethan turned, heart hammering. The words gleamed faintly in the dim light. Rule number 7. When the forest starts to write back, it's already too late. The lights flickered somewhere deep in the woods. Something laughed softly like wind through hollow bones. Part 3. The Hollow King, Segment 1. The night before the end. Rain whispered across the roof of the ranger station, soft and endless, as if the sky itself mourned. Ethan Caldwell sat alone in the operations room, the dim lamplight carving hollows beneath his eyes. Before him lay 15 years' worth of reports, water-stained, incomplete, filled with half-truths, the official history of Schwarzwald, sterilized and silent. The real history sat in a single battered notebook at his elbow. Its pages were smudged with mud and blood, arped by rain, torn by trembling hands. Each line was a memory, each rule a scar. The radio hissed softly, its signal broken by static. Beyond the window, the forest pressed close. Inst the compound, shadows moving like waves. He had stopped sleeping 3 nights ago. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Jonas Keller's face, mouth open, eyes pleading before. Dissolving into mist, the young ranger's disappearance had changed everything. The station felt hollow now. Conversation died before it began. Muller had ordered a temporary suspension of night patrols, but even he could not hide the fear that had seeped into every corridor. Ethan was 3 days from retirement. 3 days, and the forest was not done with him. At dawn, Clara found him on the veranda, smoking a rare cigarette. Her face was drawn, her hair damp from the fog. "You should get some rest," she said. Ethan exhaled smoke. "I'll sleep when I'm gone. You won't make it that long if you keep this up." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "You sound like Muller." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I read your notebook." He stiffened but said nothing. "I had to," she continued. "If I'm taking over your post, I need to understand what we're facing." "And what do you think we're facing?" Clara looked toward the tree line. "Something that doesn't want us here, something old." Ethan nodded. The locals used to call it Der Hohelknig. The Hollow King, Clara frowned, a legend. Older than that. A story about the forest's soul. They said the trees were his bones, the fog his breath, the roots his veins, that anyone who took too much from the woods fed him in return. And you think he's real, Ev. Anne's voice was low. I think we stopped being visitors a long time ago. They stood in silence. The forest seemed to listen. By afternoon, Muller summoned them to the operations room. Maps lay spread across. The table marked with red circles, 3 hikers missing. He said, Marcus Klein, Sophia Wagner, Lucas Brown, last seen near Raven's Hollow. The name hit Ethan like a blow, raw. Raven's Hollow, the same area where the false voice of Muller had called to him. Weeks before, Muller continued, search teams are thin. Caldwell, I want you to lead this one. Clara, you're with him. To other. As for support, Ethan opened his mouth to object, but Muller's eyes stopped him. You've seen what's out there, the commander said quietly. You know the patterns? There was no argument to make. Ethan nodded. We move before dusk. They set out under a bruised sky, the air heavy with the smell of rain and pine resin. Ethan drove the lead jeep, headlights slicing through mist. Clara sat beside him. Check. King the radio, 2 younger rangers, Holtz and Meyer, rode in the back, silent. The road twisted deeper into the forest until it ended at a clearing half swallowed by fog, the remnants of a campsite. Lay ahead, 3 tents collapsed, a fire pit cold. A kettle overturned, no signs of struggle, no blood. Only the sense that time itself had stopped. Ethan crouched beside the fire pit, still. Warm, he murmured. Clara examined footprints nearby, bare feet but too large for any of them. Holtz cursed softly. What the hell lives out here? Ethan rose slowly. Nothing that sleeps. Night fell without warning. The forest darkened to ink, the mist thickening until flashlights barely cut through it. They found more footprints leading away from the camp, dozens of them, all bare, all human-shaped but wrong. The toes were too long, the arches too flat. The trail ended abruptly at the edge of a ravine. Clara shone her light downward. The beam caught something pale tangled in, the roots below cloth and perhaps a hand. Meyer leaned over the edge. One of them fell. Ethan raised a hand. Don't. A voice rose from the ravine, faint and broken. Help. Help us. It was Sophia Wagner. Holtz swore. She's alive. Ethan's pulse spiked. No, that's not. But Holtz was already climbing down. The moment his boots hit the slope, the fog surged upward, swallowing him whole. His scream echoed once, then cut off. Meyer stumbled back, eyes wide. Where did he? Something moved in the fog. Shapes, many of them crawling up the ravine. Wall-like spiders. Ethan fired into the mist. The muzzle flashes lit. Faces pale, eyeless, open-mouthed before they vanished again. Fall back, he shouted. They ran toward the clearing, firing. Blindly. The fog followed, a living thing. Clara threw a flare. Red light burst across the clearing, revealing dozens of figures circling the camp shadow, thin, their limbs bending wrong. From the tree line came a voice, deep as the earth itself. Ethan called well. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The sound crawled inside his bones. Clara whispered, "What is that?" Ethan's breath shook. The Hollow King. The ground trembled. Trees bowed inward as something vast moved behind them, something that wasn't bound by shape. Roots burst from the soil, coiling like serpents. One snatched Meyer by the leg, dragging him screaming. Into the darkness, Ethan grabbed Clara's arm. Flares, now. They fired the last of their flares, bathing the forest in blue. Red light. And in that light, they saw it. A shape taller than the trees, built from shadow and bark, its chest hollowed out into a cavern glowing faintly from within. 2 eyes burned their old, intelligent, and utterly merciless. You take my breath. The voice rumbled. My soil, my sons, you burn my night to stay alive. You will not leave. Clara raised her weapon. What does it want? Ethan's voice cracked. It wants me. The creatures had tilted as though listening. "You know my rules, Ethan Caldwell," it said. "But I wrote them first." The ground erupted. Ethan shoved Clara aside as a root speared through the soil where she had stood. The air stank of rot and ozone. "Run!" he shouted. They fled through the trees, flares burning low, bullets useless. The forest shifted around them, paths twisting, trunks closing in. The Hollow King's laughter followed, slow, patient, echoing through every tree. They reached the old observation tower before Donar, usted skeleton rising above the fog. They climbed, gasping, weapons nearly empty. Below them, the mist churned like a living sea. Clara collapsed against the railing. "We can't fight that." "No," Ethan said. "But maybe we can outlast it." He looked out toward the faint line of sunrise, red bleeding into gray. "Morning drives it back," he said. "Always has, and then what? You think it just gives up?" Ethan shook his head. "No, it waits." But that's enough. They watched the first rays of light spill through the fog. Slowly, painfully, the forest stilled, the laughter fad. Ed, the Hollow King, receded into silence. For now, by the time they returned to base, Meyer and Holtz were gone, the forest erasing all trace of them. Muller listened to Ethan's report. Without a word, when he finished, the commander rubbed his temples and said quietly, "You're done." Effective immediately, Ethan didn't argue. He was beyond exhaustion. That night, he locked the notebook and left it on Clara's desk. On the first page, he had written a final rule. Rule number 8. The forest is not alive, it is awake. Then he signed his name beneath it and walked out into the dawn. Segment 2. The Last Patrol. The morning of Ethan Caldwell's last patrol dawned in silver silence, no bird song, no wind. The forest simply was, ancient and still, as if holding its breath. He moved through the empty station with practiced precision, outpacking his field kit, checking his pistol, counting flares. Each motion was ritual, muscle memory honed by years of survival. 15 years in Schwarzwald had taught him everything. Except peace. When he stepped outside, the air carried the faint metallic tang of rain that hadn't yet fallen. The mist clung low to the ground, curling around his boots like smoke. Clara waited beside the jeep, uniform crisp but her eyes raw from sleeplessness. "You don't have to do this," she said. Ethan gave her a small, worn smile. "If I don't, it'll find me anyway." She clenched her jaw. "Then I'm coming with you." He shook his head. "No, someone has to stay. If it goes burn the perimeter and shut the gates. Don't open them for anyone, not even me." She reached for his arm. "Ethan." He looked at her then, truly looked. "You have the rules, keep them. They all that's left." And before she could answer, he turned and walked toward the trailhead, vanishing into the mist. The forest swallowed him whole. Every path he had walked, every tree he had marked, every breath he had drawn here, all of it pressed down on him like memory, turned physical. He moved along the old Blackthorn Trail, the same one where he had once met Lucas Weber, the man without a shadow. The soil was damp, the air heavy. His boots sank into the mud with soft, reluctant sounds. As he walked, the forest seemed to hum faintly. Not with sound, but with vibration, like a pulse beneath the earth. He paused at the clearing where Carl Brown had died. The leaves there never regrew. The earth still smelled faintly of iron. Ethan knelt and placed his hand on the soil. "You were right, Carl," he murmured. "Some things just look human." The forest listened. By midday, the sky had darkened unnaturally. The clouds hung low, almost touching the tree tops. The light dimmed till the woods seemed suspended in permanent dusk. Ethan's radio crackled suddenly, static at first, then a voice. "Ethan, come in." He froze. "This is Commander Muller. Do you copy?" His hand hovered over the radio. "Friedrich, we found something. You need to see it." The signal warped. Beneath Muller's voice came another tone, deep, layered, like something breathing through him. "Raven's Hollow, come alone." Ethan's pulse quickened. "You're not him," he whispered. "Come alone, Ethan." The radio died. He stared at it for a long moment, then threw it into the undergrowth. Rule number 5 echoed in his mind. Verify before answering any familiar voice. He pressed on, deeper into the wilderness. The deeper trails were unrecognizable now. The landmarks had shifted. Trees stood where none should be. Paths bent in impossible angles. Schwarzwald was rewriting itself around him. At some point, he began to hear the bells, faint, irregular. Chimes from no visible source, they rose and fell like wind. Through hollow wood, he followed the sound without realizing it. Eventually, the trees opened into a glade he did not know, a place not on any map. In its center stood an enormous oak, blackened and split, its branches twisting like claws. Its roots coiled outward across the clearing, thick as serpents. Something glimmered beneath it. Metallic, half buried, Ethan approached. Cautiously, it was Jonas Keller's knife. Still embedded upright in the earth where he'd found it weeks ago, but now the runes around it pulsed faintly red like embers under ash. He reached for it, the ground shuddered. A voice, low, guttural, seeped from the soil itself. "You return to where you first obeyed me." Ethan stepped back, drawing his pistol. "I never obeyed you." "You did when you stayed." The forest rippled. The oak shivered, its bark cracking open like skin. Something inside it moved. Ethan fired. Once, twice, the bullets sank in two. Bark with dull, useless thuds. "You write your rules in blood," Ethan Caldwell. "You carve them in fear, but you never understood whose Langu. Age they speak." From the fissure in the oak emerged shadows, tall, thin, half-formed figures, their mouths too wide, their eyes empty sockets. They stepped forward like puppets pulled by unseen strings. Among them, faces flickered. Carl's, Jonas's, Lena Hoffman's, all hollow, all wrong. Ethan raised the flare gun and fired into the heart of the oak. The red light ignited, though. Clearing in a flash of fire. The figure screamed. 100 voices in one breath before dissolving into smoke. When the light faded, the oak was burning slowly, black sap dripping like tar. Etha, and stood shaking, his breath ragged. "You can't keep them," he said aloud. "They're not yours." "Everything that dies in me," the voice replied, "becomes me." He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a root that moved as if alive. The world around him swayed, not in wind, but in pulse. The Hollow King was close now. Ethan could feel its presence pressing against the edges of his mind. Cold and vast, like the weight of the sea, he ran. The forest pursued him, trees shifting, roots writhing, whispers threading through the fog. Every step brought another memory, another voice calling his name. Greta Muller's laughter, his niece's scream, Carl's dying breath. He burst through the undergrowth and found himself at the northern gate of the park. The boundary between forest and road. Beyond it, the world looked almost normal. Civilization, safety, light. And standing at the gate were the shadows of the dead. Carl, Jonas, Hans Fischer. They stood in perfect stillness, blocking the exit. Their faces were calm, eyes empty, their uniforms clean and untouched by decay. Ethan slowed. His voice was barely a whisper. "No." Carl stepped forward. "You're leaving." Ethan's throat tightened. "You're not real." "Maybe not," said Carl, smiling faintly, "but we remember you." Behind him, Jonas tilted his head. "You said you'd come back for me." Ethan raised the flare gun. Again, though his hand shook violently. "Move." None of them did. "Stay." The forest whispered. "Stay where you be." Long, the fog pressed closer, thickening until it filled his lungs. The trees leaned inward, their roots inching across the road. Ethan fired a flare straight into the sky. It burst above them in a scream of lig. The figures recoiled, shadows burning away. Faces melting into smoke. He took the chance and ran, through the gate, down the old asphalt road, toward the faint shimmer of dawn. Behind him, the forest howled. By the time he reached his jeep, His hands were bleeding from gripping the flare gun too tightly. He threw himself behind the wheel and started the engine, tires spinning a guy. Wet gravel. The trees closed in behind him. Like a closing fist, he didn't look back. Rule number 7 echoed in his mind, the final one he had written. When you leave, do know. Look back, do not stop, do not return. The headlights cut through the mist, revealing nothing ahead but the long road out. He drove until the forest fell away behind him, until the air smelled like rain and not rot, until the weight in his chest began to lift. At the final bend, he slowed. The gate of Schwarzwald National Park loomed ahead, tall, iron, and open. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe. Then he heard it, a whisper from behind him, soft and almost kind. Ethan, he froze. It was Claire's voice. Come back, you forgot something. His hands tightened on the wheel. No, he whispered. Just one look. The whisper was closer, now beside his ear. He closed his eyes, slammed the accelerator, and drove through the gate. The forest roared, a sound like a thousand trees splitting at once, and then fell silent. When he opened his eyes again, the rearview mirror was empty. Only sunlight, only road. He exhaled slowly, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on his face. I made it, he whispered. But somewhere deep behind him, in the heart of Schwarzwald, the burned oak still smoldered. And beneath its roots, a voice spoke softly, patient. As time, you can leave, Ethan Caldwell, but the forest remembers. Epilogue, Rule 7. The world outside the forest was too bright, too clean, too alive. For months after leaving Schwarzwald, Ethan Caldwell found himself blinking at sunlight as if it were an illusion he couldn't quite trust. He lived alone now, in a small stone house on the outskirts of Baden-Baden. The locals called him Herr F. Gerster, the old ranger. They brought him fresh bread. Sometimes asked him about mushrooms, about the trails, about the legends of the forest. He always smiled politely. I don't go there anymore, he would say. They laughed, thinking it a joke. The nightmares came first. In the beginning, he told himself they were normal, fragments of trauma, the residue of years spent in darkness. But the dreams were too specific. He could smell the soil again, hear the bells, feel the pulse of the trees under his hands. Sometimes he'd wake in the night to find the window open, the curtains swaying as though a wind had passed through. Though the air outside was still, and once, just once, he saw footprints in the frost on his porch. Bare feet, small, a child's, by spring. He had written the rules again, on lined paper this time. Not a field log, the ink was steady, the handwriting slower, more deliberate. Do not enter the forest after dusk, do not answer voices from trees. If you see someone familiar, make sure they cast a shadow. Never follow the crying child. Verify before answering any familiar voice. When the bells ring, stay still, And you leave, do not look back, do not stop. Do not return. He pinned the page to the inside of his study door beside an old photograph. His patrol team before the disappearances began. Their smiles were unguarded, the forest behind them, green and harmless. He sometimes caught himself staring at it for long minutes, trying to remember what it felt like to be unafraid. One morning, he woke to find the 7th rule missing. The page was still there, but the last line had been neatly torn away. He searched the house, though he knew how absurd that was. He checked the desk, the window, the floor. Nothing. That night, the dreams returned, sharper now. He stood once again in the black forest, mist curling around his knees. He could hear someone crying soft, just out of sight. He turned against his own rule and saw a child standing by the burnt oak. She had no face. But when she spoke, it was Claire's voice. You forgot something. Ethan woke gasping, sweat chilling on his skin. Outside, rain lashed the windows. Thunder rolled over the valley. He sat in the dark for a long time, listening, until he heard it, the faint, unmistakable sound of bells ringing from somewhere in the Distance, he didn't go back to sleep. By morning, he had made a decision. He gathered his pack, the same one he'd used for years, though most of its weight now came from habit, not need. He filled a flask, pocketed his lighter, and took the folded rules from the wall. On the back, in small, careful handwriting, he added one last line. 8. If the forest calls you by name, pretend you do not hear. He folded the paper once, placed it inside his coat, and stepped outside. The air smelled of rain and pine. The world was quiet. He walked down the narrow country road. Toward the edge of town, cars passed, people nodded politely, dogs barked in yards. It all seemed faintly unreal, as though he were walking through a photograph of someone else's life. By noon, the road narrowed to a dirt trail, overgrown, forgotten. The trees grew thicker here, older, their branches interlocked above like ribs. He hesitated only once at the point where the first roots broke through the path. The sign ahead was rusted, half swallowed by moss. Schwarzwald National Park, closed. He stared at it for a long moment, then he stepped past it. Inside, the forest felt new. The air was colder, but the light clearer, no longer the suffocating gloom of his memories. Birds sang faintly in the distance. For a moment, he wondered if perhaps it had healed itself, or if the evil had moved on, but then he noticed the trees watching him. Not with eyes, but with intent, the slow, patient attentio, and of something that had been waiting a very long time. He reached a familiar clearing. The ground there was scorched, though the oak was gone. In its place lay a crater filled with rain water. Ripples spread across the surface, though no wind stirred. He crouched, staring at his reflection. For a second, it looked like him. Older, yes, but human. Then the image blinked. He did not. The reflection smiled. Ethan stood, backing away slowly. You're not real, the water whispered. You said that before. The surface rippled again, and a hand, his own hand, broke through, reaching upward. Ethan stumbled backward, slipping in the mud. The reflection rose from the pool, pale, perfect, wrong. Another Ethan, younger, whole, eyes calm as glass. You left me there, it said. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. I stayed. You ran, but we are the same, Ethan Caldwell. The doppelganger tilted its head, and in that motion Ethan understood this was the forest's last trick. Not fear, not monsters. Memory. It didn't need to chase him. It only needed him to remember. You belong here, it said softly. All those who write the rules do. Ethan took a step forward. If that's true, he raised his lighter. Then so do you. He flicked the flame and dropped it into the pool. For an instant, nothing happened. Then, the world screamed, flame erupted upward, consuming air, mist, reflection, everything. The forest convulsed, branches cracking, roots twisting. Ethan staggered back, shielding his face from the heat. You can't burn what you are, the voice roared. He shouted back, I'm not yours anymore. The fires swallowed the clearing whole, and then silence when the rescuer, as found him 2 days later. He was sitting beside the crater, eyes open, body unburned. The forest around him was untouched. No fire, no damage. Only a circle of blackened soil where the pool had been. He didn't speak for weeks after that. When he finally did, it was to a young officer who had once trained under him. I kept the rules, Ethan said quietly. All but one. The officer frowned. Which one? Ethan smiled faintly, eyes far away. The one that says not to return years past. The story of the Ranger of Schwarzwald became local legend, a cautionary tale. For tourists and hikers, they said the old man still lived, somewhere near the edge of the forest, keeping watch. Some swore they'd seen a light moving through the trees at night, a flare that never burned out, and if you stood close enough to the old gate. On certain nights when the mist was thick, you could see a sheet of paper pinned to the post. Weathered, stained, but legible. The rules. All 8 of them, including the last, written in a hand. That wasn't his. 9. The forest remembers who you were, do not remind it. And somewhere deep within Schwarzwald, beneath roots older than the language of men, a whisper drifted through the dark. You will come back again? A pause, then, softly, he always does.